Good evening and welcome to the Executive Elevation Experience. The Executive Elevation Experience is an executive coaching program that supports women's executive ambitions and executive impact. Tonight, we are so privileged to be joined by Phinah Kodisang, who's the CEO of the Soul City Institute for Social Justice. Phinah has been my coaching client, but also my organizational client. And my feminist sister. And I'm really pleased to have you here, Phinah. Please tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do at Soul City.
Thank you very much for the platform, and it's a privilege for me to be sitting having this conversation with you, Coach. So my name, as explained, is Phinah Kodisang. I'm a woman leader. I'm a mother of two. I'm a feminist. I'm an ally to the LGBTI community. You know, I'm a woman who's all-rounded in her leadership. You know, I believe in mentoring. I believe in coaching. I believe in rising with others. So if we are talking about women leaders, my philosophy is that you can't be a leader who doesn't have someone who can take over from you. You know, so you need to be the kind of leader who's able to shape and build someone so that they can take over your job one day.
Great. And I think we are both agreed on that. Tell us what you love most about your role as CEO at Soul City.
The role is interesting in that you are everything. You are the chief administrator, you are the chief finance person, you are, you know, even cleaning, you need to understand everything about the organization. So that's the interesting thing about being a CEO, is that you have your eye on everything. But it's a challenging role because everything rests on your shoulders. You need to make sure that the doors of the organization are kept open. You need to make sure that everyone feels secured in their job. You know, it's your responsibility to make people feel secured, especially in the economy we are in, where, you know, people lose their jobs. So it rests on your shoulder to keep the boat floating. But it's also, you know, interesting in that you get to stretch yourself and see what you are good at, what you still need development in, and what you are able to do without even thinking twice about it. So you get to see your strength, you get to see, you know, how strong you are or how weak you are. And it's not necessarily a weakness when you look at your areas of strength and your area of weaknesses, because you are able to then develop your areas of weaknesses. And your areas of strength, you are able to then transfer the skills to others and get stronger. So that's what I love about the job. It teaches you about yourself. It teaches you about everybody else. And you get to learn so much in that position.
Thank you. So you stepped into the CEO role that was held by someone who was basically seen as the face of Soul City. And what I've appreciated and seen about how you've stepped into the role is how you've made it your own. And what I want you to talk to us a little bit about is, you know, what thinking did you take into the role, and how did you decide, and what did you do to make the role your own?
I think coaching sessions helped. I must acknowledge that they really helped in shaping my thinking about the role. You know, and the mistake that most people make is that they enter into a role wanting to be someone instead of being themselves. So I have my own way of doing things. I have my own leadership style, and it needed to come out so that people receive me as me, not as the former CEO, so that they understand that when they deal with me, we will deal with things differently, right? So one of the things that was an advantage for me is that I had been with the organization. I had led projects and programs before. So I worked with most of the people. So they sort of understood who I was and how I dealt with things. So I just needed to entrench that by sitting with a lot of people one-on-one as I took over the CEO position, just to, again, re-emphasize what my expectations are, but also to find out from them what their expectations are now that I'm no longer a peer, but I'm now a senior. And, that dynamic also, that shift from being people's peers to now being their boss. And I use it because sometimes the word boss is not the right, especially in feminist spaces, So now that I was taking over the leadership of the organization, they were looking at me differently from just being a peer. But I needed to reassure people. So I sat down with most of the people one-on-one, just again to re-establish the relationship and to make that shift with them. And I think it was important, that sit down where we were just again establishing rules of engagement, and just to also indicate that the kind of leadership that I wanted to establish was that of reimagining the future with the people. And so I needed their buy-in into some of the new changes that we were bringing. And I think I remember the first thing that I did was to do like a monkey survey, just to find out from people what is it that they like about the organization the way it is, but what is it that they would say should change, and what will that change look like, and what would they recommend we implement so that they feel that they are part of the change. And I wrote a long email, not a boring email, but it was just an email that was saying to people, each and every one of you matter. I see each and every one of you contributing as pieces of the puzzle that builds this soul city. And therefore, whether you are a cleaner, whether you are the driver, whether you are a manager, all of you, when you are not there, the pieces are missing. And so I don't want people feeling like they cannot contribute because they are just there to make tea. In making that tea, there are things that they see that they want the organization to improve. What is it that, from that level they feel could be done better? And I remember how people, when they received that email, came and said, you made us feel like we belong, and we want to belong, and we feel that we want to contribute to this big dream, and thank you for giving us the opportunity. So it was good, to hear that feedback.
And I think that's so important, because I just had a conversation with a colleague earlier about sometimes when we step into the role, especially as CEO or executive director, what happens is that we step into the role because we feel we have to now prove ourselves, and then we have a focus on the tasks that have to get done. But then what happens is the people aspect suffers. So it's really amazing that, you were able to focus on the people, to get everyone on board, and to move from that premise. So, really well done with that. Of course, being a CEO is not an easy ride. There are always difficult things to manage. Do you want to share with us some of the tough lessons you've learned so far and how you've managed those?
The toughest lesson, I think, is trying to be everything to everyone. You stretch yourself thin, and you end up exhausted. You end up not being able to even do, anything for everyone. So I think the biggest lesson learned was to pace myself and to admit where I don't know anything, because sometimes people think when you are the CEO, you must know everything. And so acknowledging that I don't know everything, but I'm also willing to learn, and you can teach me some of these things. So I had to understand that I'm not, I don't have the answers to everything. And therefore, I must also reach out to other people for answers, for support, and engage with people like yourselves and say, look, here I've reached, a dead end in terms of thinking. I think I'm still thinking within the box. Help me think outside the box, or should I even remove this box and just think freely? And I think, because for me, the people aspect is always something that is important to me. I've always tried to bring people on board. But also when you do that, you sometimes put yourself in trouble with people who then, for that aspect of, your your nurturing nature, you get some people who take advantage of that. So I've had my fair share of people not doing their part, and when you call them out, you end up in trouble because now people, think you think you are all that. And that was, in fact, that was the hardest thing for me, because I felt I did everything that was needed to support these people, and they are still failing to meet their, their targets. They're still failing to meet their objectives and their deliverables. And now when I call them out for that, they are throwing it back in my face. And I really almost went through a mental breakdown, to be honest, because of that, because it was hard for me. I couldn't reconcile everything that I did in support with the feedback and the reactions that I got. But I've learned from that.
Yeah, I think those are some of the tough lessons that we learn as we lead people and lead organizations. And I really appreciate how reflective you are about it, because often, as leaders, those some of us may believe that we know it all, we seen it all, we have all the answers. But being able to recognize as a starting point, I'm not the expert in everything, and I can ask for help, is really, for me as a coach, an amazing way to go as a leader. So linked to that, I want to also touch base with you on this issue. I've been listening to a podcast by Gender at Work, where they were talking about how social justice and women's rights organizations are imploding, in a sense, because of issues around racial, gender, and other injustices. And in particular, because there's this notion that social justice and women's rights organizations are challenging all those issues externally. They are the voice of challenging those issues, yet internally, these are the same organizations that are not addressing these issues meaningfully, that there's a lot of issues around power and privilege. I want to get your sense of that. I mean, are you seeing that happen? What is your view on that?
I think there's truth to that notion. And even this week, we had to reflect a bit as the executive team around, the privilege that we have in saying we are a feminist organization, and some people within the organization feeling like they are the feminists, and some people are not cutting it, and it was hard, and it was a hard conversation, because one, everybody is on a learning curve. And with feminism, one of the principles is that we must allow people learning opportunity and learning opportunity, relearning, and it's based on people's realities. But if as an organization we take a position that says we are an intersectional feminist organization, we take that position at a strategic level, but within the strategy you have people who must now live the values of what you say the organization is. And we are all on different levels of our understanding of feminism, And so when you reflect internally, because you can solve the issues outside, you can address gender-based violence, the gendered perspective of issues, right? But internally, you are dealing with labor issues. When you have an employee who's already your employee, but who's not buying into your feminism, for whatever reason, and you cannot just chop and cut them. You need to take them on a learning journey for them to understand why it's important to assume a feminist position as an organization, and what that translates to in how they do their work, in how they carry themselves, but also within the framework of their own rights as an employee in this organization that changed its identity along the way while I was employed. and I didn't come here, to do this kind of work. If, for example, I'm an accountant, for me, I need to see that the book balances, right? But it's beyond that when you are in the organization. And so how do you as an organization that is also learning, how do you educate others? How do they learn? But how do they unlearn as well without you throwing them out with the bathwater? So without throwing the baby with the bathwater. And it's a process of contradiction, of conflict, of so many things that will uh, coexist while you are trying to build this vision of an organization that lives its values. And I think it's a struggle that we find ourselves in, and we need to be intentional about making sure that every staff member within Soul City is not saying I'm feminist because they are afraid to lose their job, but they understand what it is. And in their private life, they will live the values, even when Soul City is not there to monitor and see that they are. Otherwise, then we are creating a fake, a fake value system, right? And I think that's where we fail most. We fail firstly to convert within, but we are quick, and we I think it's low hanging fruits when we are just addressing people outside that we don't necessarily have relations with, and it's easy to call out patriarchy, toxic masculinity out there. But within, in a belief system that exists within the organization, different belief systems, that exist within the organization, when you try to shift them to be aligned to the vision and the strategy of the organization, that is the hardest work. And that's the work that we are busy with. And we find that there are some areas where there's a bit of conflict in terms of shifting people and them fully shifting without necessarily breaking the labor laws.
Thanks for that reflection. And I think, it's given, I think, all of us listening some amazing food for thought. I think, there's a lot happening in social justice spaces globally. And what you have just said, is important in the sense that we have to start walking our talk. We want to hold government accountable. We want to hold funders accountable. But are we actually holding ourselves accountable ultimately?
Yeah.
So in saying that, Phinah, the work of Soul City, tell us a little bit about the work of Soul City. And of course, it's difficult work sometimes. How do you stay grounded in terms of this difficult work?
The work of Soul City is an interesting piece of the bigger puzzle in terms of the social justice sector. In that we've come from being known as an organization that is on TV, that is doing radio work, and people have really benefited and enjoyed the products that Soul City produced, the TV drama series and all that. And in transitioning now from, behavior change communication and health to specifically saying we are doing social justice work, and our focus will be young women and girls. And we are anchoring the work we do on feminism. That transition has been very interesting in that some people still get confused, and you get asked, how many Soul Cities are there? We know the Soul City with the red band aid, and some say, but we know the Soul City with a young woman, so they think there are two organizations. And partly because some of the content still lives on social media. So you go to YouTube, you still find, the old Soul City logo there. You still have some communities, some clinics. In fact, somebody, I think 2 weeks ago, sent me a slide pack, and they were saying, please check, we are preparing to train, it's a community organization, we are preparing to train members of our community on HIV, and they were using the old Soul City logo, the Band Aid one, and I had to say, but we are no longer, since 2016, we've changed, but we have changed and the communities sort of remained behind. And for them, sometimes it's also the comfort, because that's the kind of Soul City they wanted. They resonated more with that Soul City. And the new Soul City is not everybody's favorite, because we are tackling hard issues and we are confronting the very same people who loved us, calling them out on toxic behaviors, on norms that are not that are harmful and not helpful to the development of young women and girls. So you have that dynamic where in communities, people still want you to be the Soul City that they love and are comfortable with. And so the work of bringing these Soul Cities together in the hearts and minds of people, for me, is the biggest interesting piece of our work, right? But in explaining the work that we do, we work mainly now and even before, but right now I think our main focus is young women and girls, children in the Soul Buddies clubs from the age of 8 to 14 in schools, and tailor making messaging around HIV prevention, gender-based prevention, to be age appropriate, to align with their age, so that they understand as an 8-year-old, what is HIV? As an 8-year-old, what is gender-based violence and how does it affect them, right? What is sexuality at that age, and around how their bodies develop and everything. So we have the Soul Buddies clubs that we implement in partnership with Department of Education and Health. Then you have the Rise Young Women's Club, and this targets age group 15 to 24. We're looking at increasing it to age 35 for reasons, because in South Africa, youth is up to the age of 35. So if we are saying we are targeting young people, we can't leave that cohort of 25 to 35 out of the loop. And so the work that we do there is interesting, because you take young women who come from marginalized communities, who come from diverse backgrounds, and it's young women in all their diversities. We don't choose. We don't say we work only with a specific type of a young woman. So if you are a member of an LGBTI community, you are a young woman, you are welcome in the clubs. We form clubs of 10 in communities out of young women who don't know each other. They just meet out of their interest to be a club member. But when they get there, we start building social cohesion, we start building solidarity around common issues that young people face. It could be rape, it could be suicide, it could be HIV, it could be general social issues that all of them identify with, because they come from communities that deal with those social issues every day, either as an infected or an affected person, right? Even as a survivor or a support system for a survivor. So they come together, and in the clubs, we start now educating, empowering them, giving them information, knowledge around how to navigate the social issues, but from a rights perspective. So we look at, what does the Constitution say? What are your rights according to the Constitution? How do you access these rights? What happens when these rights are denied? When you can't access them, what are the steps you take? How do you lobby? How do you mobilize? How do you build, solidarity, so that all of you can go to a counselor, for example, and say, we demand to have this service. And again, building feminist consciousness into the work that they do, for them to understand that they come from a patriarchal system, and therefore you need to fight the system with feminism. That's the only way. So that's the work that we do. And yeah, in short, can I continue?
Linked to that, why don't you just tell me a little bit about, that's difficult work, I know, of course, and a lot of what we know of the work that we do in the women's rights sector is often that, we're seen as very selfless and so on, and sometimes it comes at a cost. Yeah. So tell us a little bit about how you take care of your physical, mental, and spiritual being in working with these issues.
So as I mentioned, I'm a mother of 2. I gave birth to 2, but I have many other children, including my sister's children, including other children that I've adopted. in the community, and so my taking care of them is a way of healing myself. I dedicate time to sitting with them, understanding their issue, but we don't just spend time talking about our issues. We spend time singing, dancing, playing. I'm a very playful person. If you find me in my home, you wouldn't say this is the CEO of So City, So Fridays usually are the day where music is loud in the house. We are dancing, we are singing, and we just having fun, right? That's how I unwind, especially after a long week. But I'm also a spiritual person. I pray a lot. I read the Bible a lot. And these days I read it with um, trying to unlearn what I was raised on in terms of Bible teaching. So when I read it these days, I don't just read, for the sake of understanding a verse, but it's to look at what would a feminist verse look like, if we were to re-teach this verse, applying a feminist lens, what would it look like? Because my understanding is that, the Bible is used a lot to oppress women. And therefore, I want to contribute to that unlearning part of our people's lives, where we don't just look at the Bible and use it as a tool to oppress, but also as a tool to liberate women. Because when you look at it with those fresh eyes, you see just how it's a liberating tool as well. So that's how I self-care, and I'm in a relationship, and it's a relationship that is fulfilling, that allows me space, so I get to to be loved and to give love, and that also really helps me.
Wow, thanks for sharing. And I think also on the spiritual part, I think that's eye-opening for me also, because often I kind of say, no, I'm not into religion because, I can't see myself as a feminist fitting into a religious box. But I think you've opened my eyes as well as to, how we can bring the two closer together and how you can still live a spiritual life.
Yeah.
Despite what people may say around what feminists are or not.
Mm-hmm.
We almost at the end of our time, but I must ask you this question. Of course, we host these LinkedIn Lives because we're wanting to attract women who are wanting to move into executive roles or who want to improve their executive impact. And I wanted to ask you what advice you would give to a woman who's wanting to move into an executive role or to be more effective as an executive leader. What has your experience been, and what can you share with others that they could benefit from?
I think the first thing is to believe that you are the right person for that job. If you come in with imposter, what do they call it? Imposter syndrome, or
Syndrome.
that's, for me, it's not fair to yourself. So you need to believe that you are the right person for the job, and that you are all the, sorry. Ooh, this thanks. Sorry about
Bless
that.
you.
Thanks. So one, believe that you are the right person for the job. And as I said, even as you come into the job, you don't know everything. So don't set yourself up for failure by convincing yourself that you are there because you know everything. You are there to learn as well and to grow. So you need to build a network of people who are going to water you as a plant that is growing, because we are all plants that need, seeds that need to be watered and taken care of while we take care of others. So once you've grown, and I used this last time, and I like how, this metaphor works, that you start as a seed, you are watered by others, you grow. When you've grown as a tree, you are able to give people shade. And so don't rush the processes. Don't rush to be a grown tree without going through the steps, right? Allow yourselves a step of being taken care of, watered by others who have gone before you, who have more experience, who, like yourself being a coach. It's not a bad idea. It's actually recommended that you have someone who's a coach, as a mentor, who will hold your hand. And when they feel you are ready, they will let you go. You will flourish by yourself. But even then, when they said you are ready, if you find along the way you get stuck, go back, and say, look, I was running with things, but here I'm stuck. So all I'm saying is you are the right person for the job, and take that opportunity, because it might never come again. But when you are there, don't be a loner. You are not an island. You need other people. Grow with others and grow others as well.
Sure. Thanks, Phinah. And I think that's such a great note on which to end. Thank you so much for making the time to be with us this evening. There was a comment on the post here that said you are being so honest, and I think that's how I know you, but I also want to appreciate you for that, for the honesty, because it's in being honest and vulnerable that we are able to be good leaders. So thank you so much for that. And thanks for making time for us this evening. I'll see you soon.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Joining us. If you want to get in touch, our information is on the screen, and we look forward to seeing you in 2 weeks' time for our next LinkedIn Live Executive Elevation Experience. Have a good weekend.